Good evening everyone, welcome to Smarter Insights by Bajirao IAS Academy into Mains Answer Writing Program. And we have sessions from past few days and we have been discussing 2025 Mains question papers and its answers. And in fact, we have been trying to present good answers for all the questions which are asked in 2025 Mains examination. Through the deeper insights into the answers, you would get to know the structure and presentation of the answers and also how to write the best possible answer so that you could score very good marks in the examination. So today also we have some more questions from ethics. So we'll be understanding the basic theme of the questions and we will also try and address the demand of the question through this discussion. And the question that we are going to discuss today is about a civil servant. Now, in fact, a country like India achieving holistic development is a primary objective or a primary goal. Now, in fact, a civil servant acts as an enabler and active facilitator of growth rather than a regulator. And in fact, in order to achieve a holistic development, it is very important that civil servants must act as an enabler and facilitator rather than a regulator of growth. Now, what specific measures will you suggest to achieve this goal? And in this answer, you need to suggest specific measures, and you could also write some policy measures and examples as well in the body part of the answer. Now, in the introduction, you briefly introduce civil servants and how civil servants must evolve from controllers to facilitators, regulators to facilitators, and they should play a very important role in promoting participatory and inclusive governance for holistic growth and development. In the body part of the answer, you need to write some measures, and those measures should also include public-private partnership, capacity building, citizen-centric government, e-governance, grassroots level democracy. All those things should be mentioned. And in fact, these measures, in order to implement these measures, how a civil servant can use technology and how ethical leadership can also play a very important role, because that could foster trust, efficiency and innovation in the administration. This is how you need to write the body part of the answer. In conclusion, you just emphasize on empowering citizens, because if you empower citizens, this will result in sustainable, inclusive and people-driven development in the area or in a whole society. So this is how you need to write a model framework for this question. And if you look into the answer, first of all, you need to write a brief introduction for this question. And if we talk about the introduction, so what you should actually write in the intro of this question. Now, in the introduction, you just emphasize that civil servants, they should not play a regulatory role alone, but they should also play a role of facilitator and enabler, because they have a traditional regulatory role. There is no doubt about that, because the traditionally regulatory role encompasses enforcing rules and maintaining order. However, in the era of democratic governance and participatory development, civil servants must act as an enabler and facilitators of growth and development. And in this process, the civil servants must empower citizens, they should promote innovation and also ensure inclusive and sustainable growth, because it will lead to holistic development of an entire country or a society. So therefore, it is very important for a civil servant to make a shift or a transition from rules-based administration to result-oriented governance. So therefore, a civil servant or an administrator must not be a regulator alone. He should be an enabler or facilitator of growth and development, and that's how a holistic development goals can be realized. In the body part of the answer, you need to divide the question into component parts and you need to address each of these components with relevant examples. So first, citizen-centric governance is an important component or a dimension where civil servants need to play an enabler or a facilitator role. If we talk about the citizen-centric governance, governance which centered around the concerns or needs of the citizens is what is called as citizen-centric governance. It includes participatory decision-making on the part of citizens, grievance redressal through platforms like My Government, Jan Sunwai, and social audits. So this is how citizen-centric government can be established or can be facilitated. For example, the Swachh Bharat mission is known for its resounding success. However, the Swachh Bharat mission brought behavioral and attitudinal changes among the people. It has involved the citizens and also the local bodies, but not just enforcing the sanitation rules. So when it has involved people at the grassroots level, when it focused on behavioral and attitudinal changes, so that's how Swachh Bharat mission became a massive success, but not just simply through enforcing sanitation rules. So this is how you have to write impactful examples in the answer. Then capacity building and skill development. Now, in fact, capacity building and skill development is also another very important area, because it will lead to the human resources development or human capital development. And in fact, in India, human capital development is a very important area, a very important component. Civil servants have a larger role to facilitate or play a facilitator or enabler role in this context. So therefore, continuous training and exposure visits by the civil servants will update the officers on new technologies and best practices as well. We all knew that the Union government has launched an initiative called Mission Karmayogi. The Mission Karmayogi initiative aimed at further strengthening competitiveness on the part of civil servants and become a facilitator of innovation, growth, development, and efficiency, not just a regulator. And in fact, the civil servants can also play a very important role in promoting public-private and community partnerships, and they could also play enabler and facilitator role to facilitate the public-private partnerships and also the community partnerships. For example, the collaboration between the private sector and NGOs for developmental projects. When I say developmental projects, they include poverty alleviation, gender equality, education, healthcare, connectivity. All these aspects would come under the developmental projects, where both NGOs as well as the private sector have been playing a very important role. For example, Digital India, Startup India programs, they thrive due to government industry partnerships. They led by proactive bureaucrats. And in fact, the bureaucrats playing facilitator or enabler role led to massive success of both Digital India and Startup India programs. And then we need to talk about simplifying procedure and using technology. For example, reducing red tape through e-governance, single window clearances, process automation, ease of doing business reforms enabled faster approvals, promoting entrepreneurship and job creation. So therefore, civil servants can play a very important role in simplifying the procedures and also using the technology. Now, in fact, it will help reduce the red tape. There will be a lesser delay in the implementation of the welfare programs. And in fact, reducing red tape through e-governance, single window clearances, and process automation as well. Right? And apart from that, civil servants can also play a very important role in ethical implementation and leadership. For example, civil servants, they must uphold integrity, empathy, and service orientation. This is a very important value, a very important quality which is expected on the part of civil servants, because they must be ethical and they should be empathetic towards the people. And in fact, every civil servant should uphold the values of integrity, empathy, and service orientation. Here, you could mention the example of IAS officer Armstrong Palmer's community-driven road project in Manipur, and that shows a facilitative leadership on the part of this honest IAS officer. And in the conclusion, in order to achieve holistic, inclusive, and sustainable development, a civil servant's role is not just a facilitator or not just a regulator, but a civil servant's role must be facilitator and enabler. And in fact, it is expected that every civil servant should be a catalyst of change. And therefore, civil servants should play a very important role when it comes to empowering citizens, capacity building, nurturing innovation. So, by fostering trust, collaboration, and accountability, civil servants can truly act as a driving force of inclusive and sustainable national growth. So this is how you can also write an impactful conclusion in the answer. Let's discuss another very important question. And in fact, this question is about the ethical work culture. Now, in fact, this question says, it is said that an ethical work culture, it must be code of ethics in place in every organization. To ensure value-based and compliance-based work culture with suitable measures, would you adopt in your workplace? Right? So this question says that it is said that for an ethical work culture, right? So there should be a ethical work culture in every organization. So in order to ensure ethical work culture in every organization, there must be a code of ethics in place in every organization. Only then we'll be able to ensure ethical work culture. However, to ensure a value-based and compliance-based work culture, what suitable measures would you adopt in your workplace? So you need to suggest some measures, and those measures would result in value-based and compliance-based work culture in an organization. I hope you have understood this. Now, in the introduction, you just emphasize on the code of ethics and how the code of ethics guides the behavior of individuals and how ensures integrity, transparency, accountability in the organizations. And in the body part of the answer, you should simply mention some measures, and those measures would result in value-based and compliance-based work culture in your organization, and you must mention the examples as well along with the points. For example, a citizen-oriented transparency mechanisms like social audits, right to information. So all these things have to be mentioned as examples in the body part of the answer. And then in the conclusion of the answer, you just have to mention that embedding ethics ensures trust, compliance, and value-driven organizational culture. This is how you need to write the conclusion in the answer as well. So I hope you have understood this model framework. So let's discuss and let's understand the body part of the question, right? So in the introduction of the body part of the question, now for any organization, ethical work culture acts like a foundation. It acts like a foundation, and based on this foundation, other values like trust, transparency, efficiency, all other values are actually dependent on the foundation. Here the foundation is work culture. So therefore, work culture is a foundation for any organization. And in fact, if there is any law, this law requires or ensures compliance from the organization with the specific law. And in fact, it is values that ensures commitment on the part of the employees or the stakeholders, right? So one thing that we should understand, values are very important because values ensure commitment on the part of an individual, on the part of an employee, because laws are externally enforced. Laws are externally enforced. So there is no guarantee of commitment from the employees. But if an employee is having values, it ensures commitment on the part of employee. Now, in fact, a code of ethics, it provides guiding principles for right conduct, right? So if we talk about a code of ethics, so it is a set of ethical principles, right? Code of ethics actually means a set of ethical principles, and it provides a guiding principles for the right conduct of an employee. And apart from that, it also helps align the personal values with the organizational goals as well, because every individual have a personal values. And in fact, it is very important to align personal values with individual goals. So therefore, in order to build a value-based and compliance-based culture, and this is what has been asked in the question, in any organization, it is important to build value-based and compliance-based culture. So in order to build such a culture, institutional and behavioral measures are important and they are essential. Now in the body part of the answer, what you should actually write. Now in the body part of the answer, you just have to mention about institutionalizing a clear code of ethics. And this is very important on the part of an organization. So therefore, a draft comprehensive code of ethics. It consists of a set of ethical principles, and this draft code of ethical or ethics should emphasize on values like integrity, impartiality, transparency, accountability, and service orientation on the part of the employees. So this is the first step to build a value-based and a compliance-based culture in any organization. For example, the Central Civil Services Conduct Rules of 1964. They provide moral and behavioral guidance for Indian bureaucrats. So make sure that you mention at least one example in each of these dimensions. Next, we'll be talking about ethics training and sensitization. And in fact, ethics training and sensitization is also another very important dimension to build a value-based and compliance-based work culture. And in fact, there is a need to conduct regular workshops and case-based training on ethical dilemmas, because as an employee, they face ethical dilemmas. And in fact, it is also important to imbibe the value of integrity and public service values. So therefore, there is a need to conduct regular workshops and also case-based training as well. For example, Mission Karmayogi. So this Mission Karmayogi, an initiative launched by Union government to further strengthen the capacity building among all the civil servants. So this also includes ethics and emotional intelligence for the civil servants. And then leadership is another very important quality or a very important dimension for a value-based and compliance-based work culture in any organization. And in fact, the senior officers who are more experienced, they must demonstrate the ethical behavior in taking decisions. So therefore, the senior officers can set a strong precedent for the junior officers about the resources utilization, efficient functioning. So here you could write the example of former IAS officer T.N. Seshan and his crucial role in Election Commission of India and ECI reforms. Because T.N. Seshan, he showed integrity in enforcing election laws, and that has inspired the election reform across the institutions. And then another important dimension is there is a need to strengthen the accountability and transparency mechanisms in the organization. So for that to happen, there is a need to establish a transparent performance evaluation, whistleblower protection. So whistleblowers are those individuals, if there is any wrong is happening, they would immediately report those wrongdoing or wrongdoer. And apart from that, there is a need for grievance redressal systems as well. So these measures have to be adopted to further strengthen the accountability mechanisms, and that will result in the value-based and also compliance-based work culture. For example, we can establish vigilance cells, internal audit mechanisms in the government departments, and these could further enhance the compliance. And then we should also talk about the other important aspect, which is promoting transparency and citizen engagement. For example, the Right to Information Act and e-governance. So these are all the initiatives which aimed at achieving greater transparency and greater citizen engagement, because RTI focuses on empowering citizens with the information. E-governance would cut down the time and would further enhances the transparency in the government services. And apart from that, another very important dimension is social audit. They ensure openness and they reduce corruption. For example, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. And if social auditing is done within the MG Narega, so it could foster ethical accountability at the grassroots level, thereby further enhancing the trust between the government and the public. And apart from that, it will also result in a greater transparency and it prevents or arrests corruption as well. Now finally, in the conclusion, for any organization, code of ethics very important. However, in order to achieve value-based and also compliance-based work culture, following dimensions or following components must be included in the organization's work culture. Now, in fact, by combining value-based motivation with compliance-based systems, a civil servant can ensure that integrity, transparency, and service to citizens. So these three dimensions are the cornerstones of governance and public trust. So this is how you need to write conclusion in this answer. And next very important question, it says that India is an emerging economic power of the world because it recently secured the status of the fourth largest economy in the world in terms of GDP. And in fact, this position of India as the global economy in the global economies has been as per the International Monetary Fund's projection. However, it has been observed that in some sectors, allocated funds remain either underutilized or misutilized. So therefore, it is the main problem. The funds are either underutilized or misutilized. What specific measures would you recommend for ensuring accountability in this regard so that we could stop the leakages and gaining the status of a third largest economy of the world in the near future? Now, in fact, India's objective is that by 2030, India should become a third largest economy. So we should become a third largest economy by 2030. However, to become a third largest economy, we must focus on underutilization and misutilization of existing financial resources. And we should focus on a greater transparency and accountability when it comes to spending the financial resources so that we could stop the leakages and we could achieve the target of becoming the third largest economy by the year 2030. And we could also overcome economy like Japan. Now the introduction. So you could briefly write about India's economic growth. And you should also stress on efficient fund utilization in the introduction in a very brief way, because efficient fund utilization, arresting misutilization and underutilization will result in sustained growth and it will also ensure fiscal responsibility. In the body part of the answer, you need to talk about the measures include strengthening digital financial monitoring, outcome-based budgeting, transparent audits, blockchain-enabled tracking, and local capacity building for accountable spending. So you need to suggest all these measures with adequate data and examples. And in fact, it is true that the transparent, accountable, efficient governance, which prevents underutilization and misutilization of funds, ensures inclusive growth and economic advancement, and very soon it will help us achieve the goal of becoming the third largest economy and also becoming Viksit Bharat by the year 2047. Because also understand that we wanted to become Viksit Bharat by 2047. So therefore, in this context, let's try to answer this question. In the introduction, what you should write. Now, we all knew that as per IMF projections, India became the fourth largest economy in the world recently. And in fact, the fourth largest economy status that India has got is because of the robust reforms in digitalization and also the demographic dividend. So we have been focused on reaping the benefits from the demographic dividend. However, the problem in the Indian economy is underutilization and misutilization of the financial resources in some key sectors. Now, if we are continuously underutilizing and misutilizing crucial finances, it will lead to undermining the growth outcomes and eroding the public trust as well. So therefore, in this context, we should focus on ensuring fiscal accountability. We should focus on ensuring fiscal accountability, efficient public expenditure management, and therefore it is important and essential to sustain momentum and achieve goal of becoming the third largest economy, to achieving the goal of third largest economy. So therefore, we should further strengthen the accountability, and we should arrest underutilization and misutilization of funds, and we should sustain the momentum, and we should continue to grow. Now, in the body part of the answer, you need to suggest some measures. Firstly, strengthening public financial management system. Now, in fact, in this context, so it is very important that we need to implement real-time expenditure tracking. However, the real-time expenditure tracking through technology and other digital platforms such as Public Financial Management System or PFMS, because this PFMS can result in greater transparency in centrally sponsored schemes like MG, Narega and PM Kisan, right? So PM Kisan and MG Narega, and it will enable direct fund monitoring. And then you need to talk about other dimensions as well. For example, outcome-based budgeting should be another area that has to be focused. So in fact, shift focus from fund allocation to results achieved through outcome budgeting and performance audits. Now, in fact, here outcome budgeting and performance audits are very important so that the allocated funds are spent in a proper manner. And in fact, the outcome budget of 23-24 is linked budgetary spending to measurable outputs across the ministries. And another very important dimension is that there is a need to strengthen audit and vigilance mechanisms. So in order to do that, we should empower institutions like Comptroller and Auditor General, Central Vigilance Commission, social audit units for timely audits and accountability. And in fact, the social audit under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, it helped detect ghost beneficiaries and curb fund leakages as well. And then we need to talk about promoting transparency through technological interventions. So in order to promote transparency through technology, there is a need to use blockchain and GIS based monitoring for tracking fund flow and project implementation. For example, the Smart City Mission, it employs digital dashboards for real-time tracking of expenditure and progress. So therefore, technology should be an enabler that could prevent misutilization and underutilization of funds, and that could result in greater transparency and accountability in the spending of financial resources. And apart from that, there is a need for capacity building and decentralized accountability. In order to do that, there is a need to train local officials in financial management and empower panchayats and urban local bodies for better fund utilization as well. In this, 15th Finance Commission can actually play a very important role, because 15th Finance Commission grants encourage the local accountability through performance linked incentives. Now, in the conclusion of this answer, what you have to write: to ascend to the next stage of economic power, India to become a next stage economic power, India must ensure that every rupee spent, it delivers the value. And in fact, through robust digital monitoring, institutional accountability, citizen participation, government can curb leakages and enhance transparency, convert economic potential into inclusive and result-oriented growth. So therefore, it will pave the way for India to become the third largest economy very soon, and also become Vikasit Bharat or developed country by the year 2047. 100th year of India's independence. And that's all in this, and thank you so much. Please subscribe our YouTube channel and also like our video. Thank you so much.